अस्सलाम वालेकुम जी। मैं ग्रुप मेंबर्स को एक इन्फॉर्मेशन देना चाहता हूँ कि अपने बच्चों का ख्याल करें, क्योंकि अभी एक नया काम शुरू हो गया है। पहले छोटे बच्चे उठाते थे, अब यंगस्टर्स को उठाना शुरू कर दिया है। 12, 15, 16, 18 साल के वो लोग जो शऊर रखते हैं, वो बच्चे अब कर ये रहे हैं कि कुरान पाक के और राग को कुरान से फाड़ के नौज़ुबिल्लाह उन्हें शहीद करके और उनके ऊपर दवाई लगाते हैं और वो फिर रास्तों में फेंक देते हैं। उन रास्तों के अंदर जिन रास्तों पे वो गाड़ियां लगा के ख़ुद गाड़ी के अंदर बैठे होते हैं। और वो बच्चे उस कुरान का वर्क जब देखते हैं नीचे पड़ा हुआ, तो वो उठाते हैं और ये हमारी फितरत है, हम उसे चूमते हैं। और जो ही उसको वो चूमने के लिए नाक के करीब लगाते हैं, वो बहुत ही तेज़ किस्म की दवाई होती है उस पर लगी हुई। फ़ौरन बेहोश हो जाते हैं। वो उनको उठा के अगर कोई देख भी लिया तो कहते हैं जी डॉक्टर के पास लेके जा रहे हैं, जी गिर गया है, जी इसको पता नहीं क्या हो गया है। तो ये एक नया काम शुरू हो चुका है। तो अपने बच्चों को अवेयरनेस दें, सारे बच्चों को बिठा के बताएं कि बिल्कुल भी इस तरह अगर कुरान के औराक मिलते हैं पड़े हुए, तो उनको उठा लें, उनको वहीं पे तय कर लें, नाक के करीब लेके नहीं जाना। तो अल्लाह रब्बुल इज़्ज़त सबको अपनी हिफ्ज़ व अमान में रखे, आमीन।
Blackridge Town was the kind of place where nothing unusual ever seemed to happen. Small houses stood quietly along narrow streets, and after sunset the town usually fell into deep silence. But there was one place in Blackridge that people avoided talking about. It was the old railway station at the edge of town. For decades, trains had passed through that station every night. Most of them were normal passenger trains or cargo trains traveling between major cities. Yet the locals believed that one train was different from the rest. They called it the last train at midnight. According to local rumors, the train appeared every night at exactly 12:05 a.m. The strange part was that no one could find this train listed in any railway schedule. Some people said it had been running since the 1960s. Others believed it was much older. But the most disturbing part of the story was not the train itself. It was the people who boarded it. Over the years, several travelers had disappeared after being seen at the station late at night. Some witnesses claimed they had seen those missing people stepping onto a train just before midnight. After that, they were never seen again. Police investigations never found any evidence. Officially, the disappearances were labeled as missing person cases. But the residents of Blackridge knew something was wrong. Very wrong. Section 2, The Journalist. Ethan Carter was not the type of person who believed in ghost stories or supernatural rumors. He was a journalist who worked for a small investigative news website that focused on strange mysteries. When Ethan first heard about the legend of the midnight train, he thought it sounded like a perfect story. A mysterious train. Missing passengers. And a small town hiding secrets. It was exactly the kind of story that could attract thousands of viewers online. So one cold autumn evening, Ethan packed his camera equipment and drove to Blackridge. Rain was falling softly when he arrived. He asked. Samuel hesitated before answering. The door's open, he said slowly. And sometimes, people get on the train. Ethan laughed softly. Well, that sounds normal. That's what trains are supposed to do. Samuel shook his head. No, he said. You don't understand. Anyone who gets on that train never comes back. A deep silence filled the room. Outside, the wind howled across the empty platform. Ethan turned on his camera and began recording. He wanted to capture every moment of this strange night. If the midnight train really existed, he was going to prove it. And if it was just a myth, he would expose the truth. But Ethan had no idea that before the night ended, he would become part of the mystery himself. By 11:30 p.m. the railway station had become almost completely empty. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried a cold damp smell. A weak yellow light flickered above the platform, casting long shadows across the cracked concrete. Ethan stepped outside the small office and walked slowly along the platform with his camera in his hand. Every sound felt louder in the quiet night. His footsteps echoed through the empty station. The town of Blackridge was already asleep. No cars passed on the nearby road. No voices could be heard. Only the distant sound of wind moving through the trees surrounded the station. Samuel Graves stood near the office door watching Ethan carefully. "You still have time to leave," the old guard called out. Ethan turned and smiled confidently. "I came here to see the train," he replied. "I'm not leaving until it arrives." Samuel didn't argue anymore. Instead, he simply looked toward the dark railway track stretching into the forest. For a moment Ethan thought he saw fear in the old man's eyes. Ethan placed his camera on a small tripod and aimed it directly at the tracks. If the train appeared, he wanted clear footage. 11:45 p.m. Only 20 minutes remained until midnight. Section 5, Strange Signals. As Ethan waited, something unusual caught his attention. The old signal lights near the railway tracks suddenly flickered. Normally those lights were controlled by the railway system to guide trains safely. But according to the official schedule, no train was supposed to pass through Blackridge that night. Yet the red signal slowly turned green. Ethan frowned and zoomed his camera closer. "Did you see that?" he asked Samuel. The old guard nodded slowly. "It always happens before the train arrives," he said quietly. Ethan checked his watch again. 11:58 p.m. Only a few minutes left. Suddenly a deep metallic vibration traveled through the ground beneath their feet. It was the unmistakable sound of a train approaching from far away. Ethan's heart started beating faster. He adjusted his camera quickly, making sure everything was recording. From somewhere deep inside the forest, a faint whistle echoed through the night. It sounded old. Very old. Section 6, The Train Appears. At exactly 12:05 a.m., headlights suddenly emerged through the thick fog covering the railway tracks. A train slowly rolled toward the station. But the moment Ethan saw it clearly, confusion spread across his face. The train looked ancient. Its metal body was dark and rusted, and the windows were covered in grime. The design of the train looked decades older than any modern railway car. It resembled something from the 1940s. "Why is a train like that still running?" Ethan whispered. Samuel didn't answer. The train slowed down as it approached the platform. Its brakes released a long, painful screech as if the metal had not been used for years. Then it stopped directly in front of them. For several seconds nothing happened. The engine continued to rumble softly, sending faint vibrations through the platform. Then, with a loud mechanical click, the doors slowly opened. Section 7, The Passengers. Ethan carefully walked closer to the train while filming. Inside the dimly lit car, he could see several passengers sitting quietly. At first glance everything seemed normal. But the longer Ethan stared, the stranger it became. None of the passengers were moving. Not even slightly. They simply sat there staring forward, their faces pale and expressionless. Their clothes looked unusual as well. Some appeared to be wearing clothing from different time periods. One man wore a suit that looked like it belonged to the 1950s. Another passenger looked like a young woman dressed in fashion from the early 1990s. It was as if people from different decades were sitting together inside the same train. Ethan felt an uncomfortable chill run down his spine. "Who are they?" he whispered. Samuel finally spoke again. "They are the ones who boarded the train before." Ethan slowly turned toward him. "What do you mean?" Samuel's voice was almost trembling. "They are the ones who never came back." Section 8, The Open Door. One of the train doors remained open directly in front of Ethan. Warm yellow light spilled onto the dark platform. For a moment, Ethan felt a strange pull toward the doorway. It was almost like the train was inviting him inside. His curiosity began to overpower his fear. This could be the biggest story of my career, he thought. If he could record what was happening inside that train, it would prove the legend was real. Samuel stepped forward quickly. "Don't do it," the old guard warned. Ethan hesitated. But the silent passengers inside the train continued staring forward, as if they were waiting. The empty seat closest to the door looked almost perfectly prepared for him. Ethan swallowed nervously. Then he lifted his camera and stepped closer to the doorway. Section 9, The Whisper. Just as Ethan reached the entrance of the train, something strange happened. One of the passengers suddenly turned his head. It was an old man sitting near the window. His eyes were dark and tired, as if he had been trapped there for years. Slowly, the old man leaned forward and whispered something. His voice was weak but clear. "Don't get on this train." Ethan froze. The whisper sounded desperate. "Why?" Ethan asked quietly. The old man looked around nervously before answering. "Because once the train leaves the station, you will never return to your world again." Ethan felt a wave of fear wash over him. Behind him, Samuel shouted again. "Step away from the train." But it was already too late. Without warning, the train doors slammed shut. The sudden noise echoed across the empty station. Ethan jumped back in shock. The engine roared loudly as the train began to move. But something impossible was happening. Instead of following the normal railway track out of town, the train slowly disappeared into the thick fog surrounding the station. Within seconds, the entire train vanished from sight. The railway tracks were empty again. Samuel stood frozen on the platform. His worst fear had almost come true. But Ethan was still there. Breathing heavily. Holding his camera. However, when Ethan looked down at the recording screen, his face turned pale. Because the camera had captured something he had not noticed before. Inside the train, one of the passengers looked exactly like him. Ethan stared at the small screen of his camera, his hands slightly shaking. The train had already vanished into the fog. The railway tracks were completely empty again, just like nothing had ever happened. But the footage on his camera showed something different. He replayed the video slowly. At first, everything looked normal: the old train, the silent passengers, the open door. Then the camera zoomed slightly inside the train. And there it was. A man sitting near the window inside the train. A man who looked exactly like Ethan. Same face. Same jacket. Same expression. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. "That's impossible," he whispered. Samuel stepped closer and looked at the screen. The old guard's face immediately turned pale. "I told you," he said quietly. "That train doesn't follow the rules of our world." Section 12, Samuel's Story. Ethan and Samuel returned to the small office near the platform. Inside, the old heater hummed softly while the wind continued howling outside. Samuel sat down slowly and looked at Ethan with serious eyes. "There's something I never told anyone before," he said. Ethan immediately started recording again. Samuel took a deep breath. 25 years ago, my younger brother worked at this station with me." His voice became heavy with emotion. "One night he saw the midnight train just like you did." Ethan leaned forward. "What happened to him?" he asked. Samuel looked toward the dark window. "He boarded the train." The room fell silent. "And I never saw him again." Ethan spent the next hour searching through old newspaper articles on his laptop. Samuel had a small archive of records from the town. As Ethan read through the reports, a disturbing pattern began to appear. Over the past 60 years, at least 17 people had disappeared near the Blackridge station. Each case had something in common. Every victim had been seen near the railway station late at night. And every disappearance happened close to midnight. Some witnesses even reported seeing a strange old train. But the official railway department always denied its existence. Ethan realized this mystery was far bigger than he had imagined. This wasn't just a ghost story. Something real was happening at that station. And no one had been able to stop it. Section 14, The Old Photograph. While searching through the station's dusty storage room, Ethan discovered something unusual. Inside an old wooden box, he found a black and white photograph. The picture showed a train standing at the exact same station platform. But the photograph looked extremely old. Possibly from the early 1900s. Ethan studied the image carefully. And suddenly his heart skipped a beat. Because standing near the train door in the photograph was a man who looked exactly like Ethan. Same face. Same hairstyle. Same height. But the photo had clearly been taken almost 100 years ago. Ethan slowly turned the picture toward Samuel. Have you ever seen this before? Samuel looked at the photograph and immediately stepped back. That picture was taken in 1923, he said quietly. And the man in that photo disappeared the same night. Samuel finally revealed the oldest story he knew about the midnight train. According to local legends, the train was once part of a railway accident many decades ago. Long ago, a passenger train had crashed somewhere deep inside the forest near Blackridge. The accident had killed everyone on board. But strangely, no official records of the crash existed anymore. Some people believed the train had somehow continued traveling even after the disaster. Others believed the train moved between different moments in time. But one thing remained consistent in every story. Anyone who boarded the train eventually became one of its passengers. Forever trapped on its endless journey. Section 16, Ethan's Decision. Most people would have left Blackridge immediately after hearing such a story. But Ethan Carter was not most people. Instead of fear, he felt determination growing inside him. This is the biggest mystery I've ever discovered, he said. If I can prove what's happening here, it could change everything. Samuel shook his head slowly. You're playing with something dangerous. Ethan looked back at the empty tracks outside the window. I'm coming back tomorrow night, he said. I want to see the train again. Samuel sighed deeply. You might not survive a second encounter. But Ethan had already made up his mind. Section 17, The Second Night. The next evening, Ethan returned to the station even earlier than before. This time he brought more equipment. Extra cameras. A flashlight. And a digital recorder. He placed cameras in different positions around the platform so he could capture every angle when the train arrived. Samuel watched quietly from the office. You're really going through with this, the old guard said. Ethan nodded. If that train exists, I'm going to understand how it works. But deep down, Ethan could not ignore one terrifying thought. What if the train already knew he was coming? At around 11:40 p.m., something strange happened. Ethan was checking one of his cameras when he noticed movement near the tracks. A shadow moved slowly inside the fog. At first he assumed it was just his imagination. But then he heard footsteps. Someone else was walking toward the station. Ethan raised his flashlight. A young woman stepped out of the fog. She looked frightened and confused. Excuse me, she said nervously. Is this the Blackridge train station? Ethan nodded. Yes. Why? The woman looked back toward the dark road behind her. I think someone is following me. Section 19, The New Passenger. The woman introduced herself as Laura Mitchell. She explained that her car had broken down on the highway about a mile away. While walking toward the town, she had seen the station lights and decided to come here for help. Ethan listened carefully. But something about the situation felt strange. It was almost midnight again. And a traveler had just arrived at the station. Samuel walked outside and looked worried. Tell her to leave, he whispered urgently. Ethan turned toward Laura. You shouldn't stay here tonight, he said. But before Laura could answer, A distant whistle echoed through the forest. The midnight train was coming again. Section 20, The Train Returns. The ground beneath the station slowly began to vibrate again. Laura looked toward the tracks with confusion. "What's that sound?" she asked. Ethan's heart began pounding. From deep within the fog, two bright headlights slowly appeared. The old train was returning. Just like the night before. But this time something felt different. Because inside the approaching train windows, dozens of pale faces were staring out. And one of them was still Ethan. Watching him. Smiling. The old train slowly rolled into the station, its metal wheels screaming against the rusty tracks. The fog around the platform thickened as if the night itself was trying to hide what was happening. Laura stared at the approaching train with confusion. "Is that a passenger train?" she asked. Ethan did not answer immediately. His eyes were locked on the windows of the train. Dozens of pale faces stared silently from inside. None of them blinked. None of them moved. Samuel stepped closer to Ethan and whispered urgently. "You have to send her away. If she stays here when the doors open, she might become one of them." But the train had already reached the platform. With a loud metallic screech, it stopped exactly where it had stopped the previous night. Section 22, The Open Doors. The engine gave a deep rumbling sound as the doors slowly slid open. Warm yellow light spilled across the dark platform once again. Laura looked curious rather than afraid. "Oh good," she said. "Maybe this train can take me to the next town." Ethan quickly stepped in front of her. "No," he said firmly. "You cannot get on that train." Laura frowned. "Why not?" Ethan hesitated. Explaining the truth sounded insane. But Samuel didn't hesitate. "Because people who get on that train disappear forever." Laura stared at both of them. For a moment she looked like she was about to laugh. But then she noticed the passengers inside the train. They were all staring at her. Silently. Waiting. Suddenly one of the passengers stood up from his seat. It was the same old man Ethan had seen the night before. Slowly, the man walked toward the train door. His movements looked stiff, almost unnatural. When he reached the doorway, he stepped onto the platform. Ethan immediately raised his camera. The man looked around the station as if he had not seen the outside world in years. Then he spoke. "Someone new has arrived," he said quietly. His eyes turned toward Laura. "You are the next traveler." Laura took a step back. "What are you talking about?" The old passenger's face showed a sad smile. "This train always finds someone new." Section 24, The Warning. Ethan stepped forward quickly. "Why are you still on that train?" he asked. "Why don't you leave if the door is open?" The old man looked toward the dark train behind him. "I tried once," he said. "And the train brought me back." Ethan felt a chill. "What do you mean?" The man pointed toward the forest beyond the station. "I walked away from the train for miles," he explained. "But when the fog cleared, I was sitting in my seat again." Laura's face turned pale. "That's impossible." The old passenger shook his head slowly. "This train does not travel through normal places. It travels through time." Section 25, The Truth About the Passengers. The old man began explaining the terrifying truth. Each passenger on the train had come from a different year. Some had boarded the train in the 1950s. Others had boarded in the 1980s. Some had even boarded recently. But once someone stepped inside, the train never allowed them to leave permanently. Instead, it continued traveling through different moments in time. Sometimes it stopped at stations that no longer existed. Sometimes it appeared at stations decades in the past. And every time it stopped, it searched for a new passenger. Ethan suddenly remembered the strange recording from his camera. The passenger who looked exactly like him. He quickly showed the video to the old man. The man studied the footage carefully. Then he sighed. That means the train has already chosen you. Ethan felt a cold fear spreading through his chest. What do you mean chosen me? The old passenger looked directly into Ethan's eyes. Every traveler sees their future reflection before boarding. That reflection is the version of them who never escapes. Laura looked shocked. You're saying Ethan is supposed to be on that train? The old man nodded slowly. Yes. Section 27, The Shadow in the Trees. Just as Ethan tried to process what he had heard, a loud sound came from the forest behind the station. Branches snapped. Footsteps echoed through the darkness. Laura turned quickly. That's him, she whispered. The man who was following me. Ethan pointed his flashlight toward the trees. A tall figure slowly stepped out of the shadows. The stranger's face was hidden beneath a dark hood. Samuel's voice trembled. That's not a traveler, he whispered. That's something else. Section 28, The Conductor. The hooded figure slowly walked toward the train. Every passenger inside the train suddenly sat perfectly still. Even the old man on the platform stepped aside. The figure stopped near the door of the train. Then he slowly removed his hood. His face looked unnaturally pale. His eyes were completely black. I am the conductor of this train, the man said calmly. His voice echoed strangely through the night. This train must continue its journey. Then he looked directly at Ethan. And it is time for our next passenger. Ethan immediately grabbed Laura's arm. Run, he said. They both started running toward the road leading away from the station. Behind them, the conductor calmly stepped forward. But strangely, he didn't run. He simply walked. Yet no matter how fast Ethan and Laura ran, the distance between them and the conductor never increased. It was as if the station itself was trapping them. The fog grew thicker around them. The road ahead slowly disappeared. And when Ethan turned around, the train was suddenly right behind them again. Section 30, The Door Opens. The train doors opened once more. The passengers inside were all standing now. Waiting. Watching. The conductor pointed toward Ethan. Your journey begins tonight. Ethan felt Laura gripping his arm in fear. But then something unexpected happened. One of the passengers suddenly stepped out of the train. It was the other Ethan. The future version of himself. And he whispered something that changed everything. Don't let the train leave. Ethan froze when he saw the man step out of the train. The man looked exactly like him. Same face. Same height. Same voice. It was like looking into a mirror from the future. Laura stared at both of them in disbelief. How is that possible, she whispered. The future Ethan looked exhausted, like someone who had not slept for years. His eyes were filled with fear and regret. I don't have much time, he said quickly. The conductor cannot allow two versions of the same passenger to exist outside the train. Ethan felt his heart racing. What are you talking about? He asked. Future Ethan looked directly at him. I am what you become, if you board that train. Section 32, The Endless Journey. Future Ethan spoke quickly while the conductor slowly walked toward them. That train never stops traveling, he explained. It moves through different moments in time, picking up passengers from different years. Laura looked confused. But why? She asked. Future Ethan shook his head. I don't know why it started, but I know how it survives. Ethan leaned closer. How? Future Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. The train feeds on curiosity. He pointed toward Ethan. It chooses people who want answers. People who cannot resist stepping closer to the mystery. People exactly like you. Section 33, The Rule of the Train. Future Ethan continued explaining. Once someone steps inside the train, they become part of it, he said. The train keeps them alive, but it also traps them forever. Laura looked terrified. Is there no escape? Future Ethan hesitated. There might be one way, he said quietly. But no one has ever succeeded. The conductor suddenly stopped walking. His dark eyes were watching them carefully. You are breaking the rules, he said coldly. Future Ethan looked nervous. I'm running out of time. Future Ethan pointed toward the engine of the train. There is something inside the locomotive, he said. A mechanism older than the train itself. Ethan listened carefully. That machine controls the train's connection to time. If it stops working, the train will lose its power. Laura understood immediately. You mean the train will be forced to stay in one place? Future Ethan nodded. Yes. And then the passengers might finally be free. But the conductor suddenly began walking faster. You will return to your seat, the conductor said firmly. Future Ethan stepped back. I can't stay outside much longer. Section 35, The First Attempt. Ethan looked toward the engine of the train. The front car was only a short distance away. If he could reach it, maybe he could find the machine Future Ethan had mentioned. Keep him distracted, Ethan whispered to Laura. Before anyone could stop him, Ethan ran toward the front of the train. The conductor immediately turned his attention toward him. You cannot interfere with the journey, the conductor said. But Ethan was already moving. He jumped onto the metal steps near the locomotive. The old metal door was slightly open. Inside, strange mechanical sounds echoed from the engine room. Section 36, Inside the engine. Ethan pushed the door open and stepped inside. The locomotive looked nothing like a normal train engine. Instead of modern machinery, the room was filled with old mechanical devices, spinning gears, and glowing metal parts. At the center of the room stood a strange machine. It looked like a large clock made of iron. Its gears rotated slowly, producing a deep ticking sound. Each tick echoed like a heartbeat. Ethan immediately realized this must be the machine controlling the train. But before he could get closer, a cold voice spoke behind him. You should not have come here. Ethan slowly turned around. The conductor was standing in the doorway. His dark eyes glowed faintly in the dim light of the engine room. This train has traveled for more than a century, the conductor said. It cannot be stopped by one curious man. Ethan stood his ground. People are trapped on this train, he said. They deserve to go home. The conductor shook his head. The train does not take passengers, he replied. They choose to board. Ethan looked back at the ticking machine. Then maybe it's time the train stopped choosing. Section 38, Outside the train. Meanwhile, Laura and Samuel stood on the platform watching nervously. Future Ethan was slowly fading. His body looked less solid, almost like a ghost. If he destroys the machine, Future Ethan said weakly, the train will collapse. Samuel looked worried. And what happens to you? Future Ethan gave a sad smile. I disappear. Laura suddenly understood. You came here to save him, even if it means losing yourself. Future Ethan nodded. Yes. Section 39, The Decision. Inside the locomotive, Ethan approached the strange mechanical clock. The ticking sound grew louder. Every movement of the gears seemed connected to the movement of the train itself. If he broke the machine, the train might stop forever. But something else worried him. What if destroying it traps everyone in time, he thought. The conductor stepped closer. Walk away, he said calmly. This train has a purpose. Ethan clenched his fists. What purpose? The conductor's answer was chilling. To collect the lost travelers of time. Section 40, The First Strike. Ethan grabbed a heavy metal wrench lying near the engine. The conductor watched him silently. "You cannot stop time," the conductor warned. Ethan raised the wrench. "Maybe not," he said. "But I can stop your train." Then he swung the wrench as hard as he could. The metal struck the spinning gears of the machine. A loud crack echoed through the locomotive. The ticking suddenly stopped. And outside the train, time itself began to tremble. The moment Ethan's wrench struck the metal gears, a violent metallic sound exploded through the locomotive. The large iron clock stopped ticking. For the first time since the train had arrived, the engine went completely silent. Then something even stranger happened. Outside the train, the air itself began to ripple, like water disturbed by a stone. Samuel and Laura watched in shock as the platform lights flickered wildly. The fog surrounding the station twisted and moved unnaturally. It felt as if the world around them was losing its balance. Inside the locomotive, Ethan stepped back slowly. The machine he had struck began shaking violently. Small sparks jumped between the gears. The conductor stared at the broken mechanism with cold anger. "You have done something very dangerous," he said quietly. Section 42, The Passenger's Wake. Inside the passenger cars, the silent travelers suddenly began moving. For years they had sat still like statues. But now they looked confused, as if they were waking from a long dream. A man dressed in an old 1960s suit stood up slowly. Where are we?" he asked weakly. A young woman looked out the window in shock. "I was just on a train yesterday," she said. "But this place, it doesn't look familiar." The passengers began whispering nervously. They had been trapped in the train for years. But to them, only moments had passed. The broken machine had started undoing the strange spell that controlled the train. Section 43, The Conductor's Anger. The conductor stepped closer to Ethan. His calm expression had disappeared. For the first time, real anger showed on his pale face. "You do not understand what you have done," he said coldly. "This train keeps time balanced." Ethan looked confused. "What does that mean?" The conductor pointed toward the shaking machine. "Every passenger on this train was lost in time," he explained. "People who disappeared, people who were never meant to survive their moment. The train collects them, so history can continue without breaking." Laura, standing outside, heard the conductor's voice echo from the locomotive. Her eyes widened. "You mean, those people were supposed to die?" she whispered. Samuel slowly nodded. "That might be the truth." Section 44, The First Escape. Suddenly one of the passenger doors opened completely. The man in the 1960s suit stepped onto the platform. He looked around with confusion. "Blackridge Station," he said. "I remember this place." He looked at Samuel. "Wait, you look older." Samuel stared at the man in disbelief. "I remember you," he said slowly. "You disappeared here when I was a teenager." The man's face turned pale. "That was yesterday," he said. But Samuel realized something terrifying. For the passenger, only one day had passed. But in the real world, more than 50 years had gone by. Section 45, Time Collisions. More passengers slowly stepped off the train. Some were dressed in clothes from the 1970s. Others looked like they came from the 1990s. Each of them believed they had boarded the train only hours ago. But the world around them had changed. Buildings were different. Cars were newer. And Samuel, who they remembered as a young man, now had gray hair and wrinkles. Time itself was colliding. Ethan realized the conductor might have been telling the truth. If too many passengers returned to the world, the timeline could become unstable. But before he could say anything, the broken machine inside the locomotive began glowing red. Section 46, The Future Ethan Fades. Outside the train, future Ethan's body was becoming transparent. Laura rushed toward him. "You're disappearing," she said. Future Ethan nodded weakly. "The train is collapsing," he explained. "If the machine stops completely, the timeline will reset." Samuel looked worried. "What happens to all of you then?" Future Ethan gave a tired smile. "We return to where we were meant to be." Laura's voice trembled. "And you?" Future Ethan looked at the younger Ethan standing inside the locomotive. "If he survives, my future will change." Then his body flickered like fading light. Section 47, The Conductor's Secret. Inside the locomotive, the conductor stood silently near the broken machine. Ethan noticed something strange. The conductor was not aging. Not even slightly. "How long have you been running this train?" Ethan asked. The conductor slowly turned his head. "Since the first passenger," he answered. Ethan frowned. "That doesn't answer the question." The conductor's voice grew darker. "I am not the first conductor." Ethan felt a chill. "What do you mean?" The conductor pointed toward the passenger cars. "Every conductor was once a passenger." Section 48, The Terrifying Truth. Ethan's heart skipped. "You mean, someone becomes the conductor?" The man nodded. "When the train chooses a new traveler strong enough to understand time, that traveler becomes the next guardian of the train." Ethan suddenly understood something horrifying. "That's why you wanted me," he said. The conductor smiled faintly. "You were curious enough to break the rules of time. You were the perfect replacement." The broken machine sparked again behind them. But now the train was shaking violently. Outside, the entire station began flickering strangely. For brief moments, the platform changed appearance. Sometimes it looked modern. Other times it looked like the station from 50 years ago. Laura watched in fear as an old steam train appeared for a split second on the tracks. Then it vanished again. Samuel grabbed Laura's arm. "The timeline is breaking," he said. "If the train disappears like this, the past and present could mix together." Meanwhile, the passengers on the platform were panicking. They didn't understand why the world around them was changing. Section 50, The Final Choice. Inside the locomotive, Ethan stared at the broken clock machine. The conductor stepped closer. "You still have time to fix it," he said. "If you repair the machine, the train will continue its journey. And the timeline will remain stable." Ethan looked out the window. Laura and Samuel were standing on the platform. The passengers were confused and frightened. Future Ethan had almost completely disappeared. Ethan realized the terrible truth. He had two choices. He could repair the machine and allow the train to continue stealing people from time. Or he could destroy it completely and risk breaking history itself. The machine sparked again. The conductor waited silently. And Ethan raised the wrench once more. Ethan stood inside the locomotive, gripping the heavy wrench in his hand. The broken clock machine sparked again, throwing flashes of red light across the metal walls. Each spark felt like a warning. Outside the window he could see Laura and Samuel standing on the platform. Around them, the passengers who had escaped the train were panicking as the station flickered between different time periods. Sometimes the platform looked old and broken, like it had been decades ago. Other times it appeared modern again. Time itself was shaking. The conductor stood calmly a few feet away, watching Ethan carefully. "You are standing at the edge of a dangerous decision," he said. "If the machine stops completely, the train will collapse, and time will tear itself apart." Ethan's grip on the wrench tightened. "Or maybe," he said slowly, "the world will finally be free of this train." Section 52, A Vision of the Past. Suddenly the broken machine released a powerful pulse of light. The entire locomotive filled with a strange glow. Ethan covered his eyes. For a brief moment, the world around him changed. Instead of the modern train station, he saw an older version of the same place. Steam engines sat on the tracks. Men in early 1900s clothing walked along the platform. And a large passenger train stood in front of the station. Ethan realized he was seeing the past. The conductor's voice echoed around him. You are witnessing the night when the first journey began. In the vision, a crowded train prepared to leave Blackridge Station. Families were boarding. Travelers carried suitcases. Children laughed as they climbed into the passenger cars. Everything looked normal. But then Ethan noticed something strange. The conductor of that old train looked nervous. He kept checking a strange mechanical device inside the locomotive. It looked almost identical to the broken clock machine in front of Ethan. Then the device suddenly malfunctioned. The gears spun wildly. The engine roared uncontrollably. Within seconds, the train shot forward down the tracks at an impossible speed. Passengers screamed as the train disappeared into the dark forest beyond the station. That was the night the midnight train was born. Section 54, The Endless Loop. The vision faded, and Ethan returned to the present. The conductor watched him carefully. You see now, the conductor said. That accident broke the natural flow of time. The man stepped closer to the machine. The train became trapped between moments. So it continues traveling through time, collecting those who fall between history. Ethan shook his head. So you steal people to keep the timeline stable? The conductor corrected him calmly. No. We save them from being erased. Section 55, Laura's Discovery. Outside the train, Laura noticed something unusual. Near the front wheel of the locomotive, she saw a metal plate attached to the train. The plate looked extremely old. Curious, she brushed the dust away and read the engraved words. Her eyes widened in shock. Samuel, she called. The old guard hurried over. What is it? Laura pointed to the name engraved on the plate. Samuel's face turned pale. Because the name written there was Ethan Carter, chief conductor inside the locomotive. The broken machine began spinning slowly again. But this time the gears moved in reverse. The conductor watched it carefully. The machine is trying to repair the timeline, he said. If the train survives, it will continue its journey. Then he looked directly at Ethan. And you will become its new guardian. Ethan felt anger rising inside him. I'm not becoming the next conductor. The conductor's expression remained calm. You already are. At that moment Laura rushed inside the locomotive. Ethan, she shouted. You need to see this. She showed him the photograph of the metal plate she had taken. Ethan stared at the image in disbelief. His own name was clearly engraved on the train. But that doesn't make sense, he said. Laura's voice trembled. This train already knows your future. Samuel added quietly. It was always going to be you. Section 58, The Conductor's Final Truth. The conductor nodded slowly. The train searches for someone capable of understanding time. Someone brave enough to break the rules. He looked directly at Ethan. You were chosen long before you arrived at this station. Ethan felt the terrible weight of that truth. Every decision he had made had led him here. Every step toward the mystery had brought him closer to this train. It was never an accident. It was destiny. Section 59, The Final Strike. Ethan slowly looked at the machine one more time. If he repaired it, the train would continue its endless journey through time. If he destroyed it, the train and its power might disappear forever. But the timeline might collapse as well. The conductor waited silently. Laura held her breath. Samuel closed his eyes. Then Ethan lifted the wrench high above his head. I'm ending this, he said. And he struck the machine with all his strength. Section 60, The Train Stops. The wrench smashed into the iron gears. A massive explosion of sparks filled the locomotive. The machine shattered completely. For a moment, everything went silent. The train stopped moving. The fog around the station froze in the air. Even the wind stopped blowing. Time itself had paused. And in the deep silence that followed, the midnight train took its final breath. After Ethan destroyed the machine, the entire station fell into a strange silence. The air felt heavy and motionless. Even the fog around the track seemed frozen in place. Laura slowly looked around. Nothing was moving. The passengers who had stepped off the train were standing perfectly still, like statues. Samuel raised his hand in front of his face. Even the dust particles in the air had stopped moving. "It's like, time has stopped," he whispered. Inside the locomotive, Ethan dropped the wrench to the floor. The broken pieces of the machine lay scattered around him. For the first time in more than 100 years, the midnight train had no power. Section 62, The Conductor's Disappearance. Ethan turned toward the conductor. But something was happening to him. His body was slowly breaking apart into small glowing particles. The man looked at his hands calmly. "So, the journey finally ends," he said quietly. Laura stepped closer. "What happens to you now?" she asked. The conductor gave a faint smile. "I was never meant to exist forever. My purpose was to guide the train." He looked at Ethan one last time. "And now the train has chosen its final destination." With those words, the conductor's body dissolved completely into the frozen air. Section 63, Time starts moving again. For several long seconds nothing happened. Then suddenly, the wind returned. The fog slowly began to move again. The station lights flickered back to normal. The passengers on the platform started moving as if waking from a dream. A man looked around in confusion. "Where did the train go?" he asked. Another passenger checked his watch. "I was only on that train for 5 minutes. But Samuel knew the truth. Some of those people had been missing for decades. And now they had suddenly returned. The passengers gathered together on the platform. Some were frightened. Others were confused. One elderly woman began crying when she saw the modern buildings in the distance. "This town looks different," she said. "I remember when that grocery store was a gas station." Laura gently explained to them what had happened. But many of them could not understand the idea that years had passed while they were trapped on the train. For them, time had barely moved. For the world outside, entire lives had changed. Section 65, The Vanished Train. Ethan stepped out of the locomotive and looked down the railway tracks. The train was still there. But something was changing. The metal body of the train was slowly fading. Like a shadow disappearing in sunlight. The passenger cars began dissolving into thin streams of light. Samuel watched in amazement. "The train is disappearing," he said. Laura looked worried. "What about the passengers who were still inside?" Ethan felt a cold chill. He had not thought about that. Section 66, The Last Passenger. Suddenly one final figure stepped out of the fading train. It was future Ethan. But he looked weaker than before. His body was almost completely transparent now. Laura rushed toward him. "You made it out," she said. Future Ethan smiled gently. "Only for a moment," he replied. He looked at the younger Ethan standing a few feet away. "You changed the timeline," he said. "You did what I could never do." Future Ethan slowly walked toward his younger self. "This means my future will no longer happen," he explained. "The train is gone. So the version of me that was trapped inside it, will disappear." Ethan felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. "Are you afraid?" he asked. Future Ethan shook his head. "No. He looked up at the night sky. For the first time in years. I'm finally free. Section 68, The Farewell. Future Ethan's body began fading faster. Small particles of light drifted into the air around him. Laura wiped tears from her eyes. You saved everyone, she said. Future Ethan looked back at Ethan. No, he replied. You did. He placed a hand on his younger self's shoulder. Now live the life I never had. With those final words, future Ethan vanished completely. Section 69, The End of the Midnight Train. The last remaining part of the train dissolved into light. Within seconds, the tracks were empty again. There was no sign that the midnight train had ever existed. The fog slowly cleared from the station. Laura looked around in disbelief. It's really gone, she said quietly. Samuel nodded. For the first time in 50 years, the station feels normal. The mystery of the midnight train had finally ended. Section 70, A New Morning. The sky in the distance was beginning to turn slightly blue. Dawn was approaching. Police officers and emergency services soon arrived after receiving calls about the strange group of people at the station. Many of the returned passengers were taken to hospitals for medical checks. Others tried to contact family members they had not seen for decades. The world would soon learn about the mysterious disappearances being solved overnight. But the true story of the midnight train would remain a secret between Ethan, Laura, and Samuel. Later that morning, the station looked completely ordinary. Sunlight filled the platform where the strange train had stood just hours before. Workers cleaned the area while investigators examined the tracks. But they found nothing unusual. No broken machine. No old locomotive. No evidence of the train. It was as if the midnight train had never existed at all. Section 72, Samuel's Relief. Samuel sat quietly on a bench near the platform. He looked more relaxed than Ethan had ever seen him. For years I wondered if my brother was still out there, he said. Ethan looked at him. And now? Samuel smiled sadly. At least now I know the train is gone. He stared down the empty railway tracks. And no one else will disappear again. Section 73, Laura's Question. Laura walked beside Ethan along the platform. You know, something still bothers me, she said. What? Ethan asked. She looked toward the tracks. If the train collected people who were lost in time, what happens now? Ethan thought for a moment. Then he answered quietly. Maybe the world will finally take care of its own timeline. But deep down, he wasn't completely sure. Section 74, The Story Begins. A few days later, Ethan returned home. He began writing the biggest story of his career. A mysterious train. Lost passengers returning after decades. And a night when time itself nearly collapsed. But Ethan knew he couldn't publish the entire truth. Some mysteries were too dangerous for the world to understand. While reviewing his camera footage one last time, Ethan noticed something strange. In the final seconds of the recording, right before the train disappeared, the broken clock machine inside the locomotive had moved one last time. Just once. A single small tick. Ethan leaned closer to the screen. That's impossible, he whispered. Because the machine had been completely destroyed. Section 76, A Strange Feeling. Later that night, Ethan sat alone in his apartment. He couldn't stop thinking about that final movement of the machine. Was it just a glitch in the video? Or had something else happened? He remembered the conductor's final words. The train always has a destination. Ethan wondered if the journey had truly ended. Or if something new had begun. Section 77, The Empty Tracks. Back in Blackridge, the station looked peaceful under the moonlight. The tracks stretched silently into the dark forest. No trains were scheduled to pass through the station that night. Samuel locked the station office and prepared to leave. But before he turned off the lights, he heard something. A faint sound in the distance. Section 78, The Distant Whistle. Samuel slowly stepped outside onto the platform. The wind carried a soft echo through the forest. A train whistle. Very far away. But unmistakable. Samuel's face turned pale. "That can't be possible," he whispered. Because the midnight train was gone. Destroyed forever. Section 79, The Unknown Future. Miles away, Ethan suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. His heart was racing. He didn't know why. But for a brief moment, he thought he heard the same distant whistle. He walked to the window and looked into the dark streets below. Everything looked normal. But the strange feeling in his chest refused to disappear. Section 80, The Final Mystery. Back at the station, the wind grew stronger. The fog slowly rolled across the tracks once again. And somewhere deep within the forest, two faint headlights briefly appeared in the darkness. Then vanished. The midnight train might have been destroyed. But the mystery of time was far from over. 3 days passed after the strange night at Blackridge Station. The town slowly returned to normal. Newspapers reported the mysterious return of several missing people, calling it one of the strangest events in the region's history. But Ethan could not relax. Something about that last sound of the machine still troubled him. The final tick he had seen in the footage replayed again and again in his mind. If the train had truly been destroyed, why had the machine moved? Section 82, Samuel's phone call. Early one morning, Ethan's phone suddenly rang. It was Samuel. His voice sounded worried. "Ethan, something strange happened at the station last night," he said. Ethan immediately sat up. "What happened?" Samuel hesitated for a moment. "I heard the whistle again." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "You're sure?" "Yes," Samuel replied quietly. "And this time, I saw lights in the forest." Section 83, Returning to Blackridge. That same evening, Ethan drove back to Blackridge. The road leading to the town felt darker than before. As he approached the old railway station, he noticed something strange. The fog had returned. It rolled slowly across the empty tracks just like the night when the train first appeared. Samuel and Laura were already waiting on the platform. Laura looked serious. "We need to talk," she said. Section 84, A New Discovery. Laura showed Ethan something she had found earlier that day. It was an old railway document discovered in the town archives. The document listed the original passengers from the train that crashed in the early 1900s. Ethan scanned the names carefully. Most of them were unfamiliar. But one name immediately caught his attention. His own. Written clearly on the list. Ethan Carter, passenger. Ethan looked confused. "That's impossible," he said. "That train crashed over 100 years ago." Section 85, The Forgotten Passenger. Samuel looked deeply troubled. "Maybe the crash didn't just break time," he suggested. "Maybe it created a loop." Laura slowly nodded. "A loop that repeats until someone finally breaks it." Ethan thought about the strange vision he had seen inside the locomotive. What if that moment had not only shown him the past? What if he had somehow been part of it? Section 86, The Tracks in the Forest. To understand the mystery, the three of them decided to follow the railway tracks into the forest. According to the old stories, the original train crash had happened somewhere deep among the trees. The night air was cold as they walked along the tracks. The forest felt unusually quiet. Even the animals seemed silent. After nearly 20 minutes of walking, Laura suddenly stopped. "There," she whispered. Ahead of them, something metallic glimmered in the moonlight. Section 87, The Hidden Wreck. Half buried beneath the trees and soil was an old train locomotive. Its metal body was rusted and broken. Parts of the train were scattered across the forest floor. Ethan stepped closer and examined the wreck. "This must be the original train from the accident," he said. Samuel nodded slowly. "This is where it all started." But something about the wreck looked strange. Despite being over a century old, the metal still felt warm. Section 88, The Broken Clock. Inside the ruined locomotive, Ethan discovered something shocking. Lying among the broken metal was a familiar device. The same strange clock-like machine he had destroyed inside the midnight train. But this one looked much older. Its gears were frozen in place. Laura stared at it in disbelief. "So there were two machines?" she asked. Ethan shook his head slowly. "I think this was the original one." Suddenly the machine released a faint ticking sound. Tick. The three of them froze. Samuel stepped back. "That thing shouldn't still be working," he said. Tick. Another movement. The ancient gears shifted slightly. Ethan realized something terrifying. Destroying the machine on the train had not ended the mystery. Because the real source of the train's power was still here. Section 90, The Awakening. The ticking sound grew louder. The ground beneath the wreck began vibrating slightly. Laura looked toward the railway tracks behind them. The fog was returning again. Thicker than before. Samuel's voice trembled. "I think we just woke something up." From somewhere deep within the forest. A distant whistle echoed again. Section 91, The Truth About the Loop. Ethan stared at the old machine. Suddenly everything began making sense. "The train wasn't created by the accident," he said slowly. "The accident created the machine." Laura frowned. "What do you mean?" Ethan explained his theory. The machine was designed to control time. But when the train crashed, the device malfunctioned and created a temporal loop. Every time someone tried to destroy the train, the timeline reset itself. Section 92, The Endless Cycle. Samuel looked horrified. "So the train never really disappears?" Ethan nodded. "It only restarts." Laura crossed her arms. "Which means the midnight train will eventually return." The ticking machine continued moving slowly. Tick. 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 Each sound echoed like a countdown. Suddenly Ethan felt a strange sensation in his chest. Almost like the machine was calling to him. He stepped closer without thinking. Laura grabbed his arm. "Ethan, stop." But Ethan's eyes were fixed on the spinning gears. He remembered the conductor's words. Every conductor was once a passenger. And the train always chose someone new. Section 94, The Pull of Time. The machine glowed faintly. Ethan felt memories flashing through his mind. Images of the midnight train. Passengers staring through the windows. The endless journey through time. Samuel noticed Ethan's strange expression. "You're feeling it too, aren't you?" he asked. Ethan nodded slowly. "It's trying to connect with me." Section 95, Laura's Fear. Laura stepped between Ethan and the machine. "No," she said firmly. "You're not becoming the next conductor." Ethan looked at her. "But if someone doesn't control the machine, the timeline could collapse again." Laura shook her head. "There has to be another way." The ticking machine suddenly sped up. Tick. 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 The fog around the forest grew thicker. Section 96, The Returning Lights. Back near the railway tracks, two faint lights appeared in the distance. Just like before. Headlights. Samuel stared in disbelief. It's happening again. The midnight train was returning. But this time, the locomotive coming through the fog looked different. Older. Much older. Section 97, the first train. Ethan's eyes widened. That's the original train, he whispered. The same one from the crash in the past. The temporal loop had restarted from the very beginning. Laura felt a wave of panic. If that train crashes again, the entire cycle starts over. Section 98, the final realization. Ethan finally understood the truth. The train could not simply be destroyed. Someone had to control the machine properly. Someone had to guide the train through time. Someone had to become the conductor. He looked at Laura. I think this is why my name was on that passenger list. Laura shook her head. No, there has to be another solution. The train was getting closer. Its whistle echoed through the forest. Samuel looked at Ethan. If you step into that train, you may never return. Ethan knew the risk. But he also understood something else. If no one controlled the machine, time itself might collapse. Section 100, the next journey. The old train emerged from the fog. Exactly like the one from the vision. The doors slowly opened. The ticking machine behind Ethan glowed brighter. Laura grabbed his hand tightly. Don't do this, she whispered. Ethan looked at the train. Then back at the machine. The journey of the midnight train had begun again. And once more. It was waiting for its next conductor. The ancient train slowly moved through the thick forest fog. Its iron wheels groaned loudly as they rolled along the old tracks. The headlights cut through the darkness like two glowing eyes. Ethan stood near the broken machine, staring at the train that was getting closer every second. Laura held his arm tightly. You don't have to do this, she whispered. But Ethan already understood the truth. If no one controlled the machine, the loop would begin again. The crash would happen. And time would break forever. Section 112, Samuel's warning. Samuel stepped closer. I've watched this station for half my life, he said. I've seen people disappear, families destroyed, and years of mystery. He looked at Ethan seriously. But if you step onto that train, you might never come back. Ethan nodded slowly. I know. Samuel sighed deeply. Then whatever you decide, make sure this is the last time the train runs. Section 113, the doors open. The old train finally stopped in front of them. The metal doors opened slowly with a loud echo. Warm yellow light spilled across the dark forest ground. Inside the train, the empty passenger seats waited silently. No passengers. No conductor. Just the silent train. Waiting. For Ethan. Section 114, Laura's promise. Laura stepped in front of Ethan. If you get on that train, she said, promise me something. Ethan looked at her. Promise that you'll find a way to end it. Laura's voice trembled. Promise this train will never return again. Ethan gave a small nod. I promise. Section 115, the first step. Ethan slowly walked toward the train door. Each step felt heavier than the last. The ticking machine behind him continued moving faster. Tick. 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 The entire forest seemed to be holding its breath. Then Ethan stepped inside the train. Inside the train, everything was silent. The old passenger seats were covered in dust. Dim lights flickered above the narrow hallway. Ethan slowly walked toward the front locomotive. He could feel the strange pull of the machine guiding him forward. The train door closed behind him with a loud metallic sound. The journey had begun again. Section 117, the machine room. Ethan entered the locomotive where the strange time machine was located. The device looked exactly like the one he had destroyed earlier. But this one was older. More powerful. The gears spun slowly, glowing faintly with blue light. Ethan stepped closer. The moment his hand touched the machine, the entire train began to move. Section 118, Becoming the Conductor. The locomotive filled with bright light. Memories rushed into Ethan's. Outside the window, Ethan saw the old Blackridge station exactly as it appeared in the vision. Families were boarding the train. Passengers laughed and talked happily. They had no idea what was about to happen. Ethan knew the accident would occur within minutes. If he didn't stop it now, the loop would begin again. Section 123, The Warning. Ethan quickly stepped out of the locomotive and walked through the passenger cars. He reached the door and jumped onto the platform. People stared at him in confusion. "Listen to me," Ethan shouted. "This train is not safe." The conductor of the original train frowned. "Who are you?" he asked. "There's a problem with the engine," Ethan said urgently. "You have to stop the train." Section 124, The Investigation. The original conductor reluctantly walked toward the locomotive. Ethan followed him inside. Within seconds, the man noticed the unstable machine inside the engine. His eyes widened. "This device is malfunctioning," he said. "If we start the train now, it could lose control." Ethan nodded. "That's exactly what will happen." Section 125, The train is cancelled. The conductor stepped outside and raised his voice. "Everyone off the train." Passengers looked confused but slowly began stepping back onto the platform. Within minutes, the entire train was empty. The journey that once caused the disaster never started. Section 126, The loop breaks. Inside the locomotive, the time machine suddenly began glowing brightly. The gears spun wildly before slowly stopping. Ethan felt the strange pull of time fading. The accident that created the midnight train had been prevented. The loop was finally broken. Section 127, The disappearing train. The train around Ethan began dissolving into light. The metal walls faded slowly. The machine itself crumbled into dust. Without the accident, the midnight train had no reason to exist. Ethan smiled slightly. The nightmare was over. Late one evening, Ethan returned to Blackridge Station. The platform was quiet. The wind moved gently through the trees. The track stretched into the distance. But nothing appeared. Section 134, The end of the journey. Ethan smiled slightly. For years the midnight train had traveled through time, collecting lost travelers. But now its journey was finished. History had healed itself. The station was finally free. Section 135, The final look. Ethan took one last look down the dark railway tracks. The forest was silent. The fog was gone. And the night felt peaceful again. Section 136, The story ends. As Ethan walked away from the station, the moon rose above the trees. The legend of the midnight train slowly faded into memory. A mystery that once controlled time itself was finally over. Life continued normally in Blackridge. New trains arrived. New travelers passed through the station.